Hey, everybody, it's Dr. Tom Moorcroft back with you for this episode of the Healing from Lyme Disease Summit. And this is such a special treat in this episode. We're getting to talk to Nick, the EMF guy, Pino. And, when I think about EMFs, I just think there's so much that we don't know. There's so much baloney out there, to be frank. And there's so many different things that people are saying that are scaring us. Yet we know that it's really critical to our healing to understand these and be able to take certain steps that allow us to really take back control over our healing. And just like the whole summit, we're not only giving you just like this amazing information to learn from and go home with, but things that you can practically do. And so this is why I love our opportunity to talk with Nick tonight, is because when I first met him, he was the first person that combined two major things in EMFs for me. And one was the research, because I'm a scientist and I want to know what we know. But then how do I practically apply this at home without worrying about like bells and whistles and gadgets? Sometimes I need them, but if I'm going to use them, I want to know which ones to use. But really, what are the things that I can do today at home to protect myself and my family? So Nick, when we first met, that was like the thing that jumped out at me. So I'm just so privileged and honored to have you here with us, and welcome.
Well, thank you so much. I'm humbled, really. And this is what I've been trying to do for years now, is just, yes, to give you the information that tells you, okay, well, EMFs, well, first, what it is, because some people are still confused about it. Then where is it? What emits EMFs and what can we do about it? Not some topic where, okay, EMFs are everywhere, they're damaging you, and there's nothing you can do about it. How about that? That does not sound good to me. So what can you actually do about it to minimize exposure in the scope of healing from Lyme disease, or just being a healthy individual? But when you are affected by Lyme, when you have something chronic that has been going on for years, you feel weak, you do not feel good in your body, and your health is not in a state where you feel it should be at, then you need to focus on EMFs even more than the average healthy person.
Yeah, I think it's so critical. And we've heard about it over the years. But like you said, I mean, it's like, how do we live a healthy life? Because my goal is for everybody I see to get better, right? My goal of becoming a doctor was just basically to see how we're messing up the body so that I wouldn't do that and I would help people stay healthy. Then I realized there's this whole world of chronic illness. So what we were planning on talking about is, how are EMFs slowing down your recovery? And I think with what you said a moment ago, which is so critical, is let's just like sort of step back and, well, I want to know what EMFs are, but also I'd love maybe to get a little backstory, is like, what got you in, what are they? And then what actually got you interested in EMFs? Like, why are you like known as the go-to person for synthesizing all of the research and all of the stuff we can do in the whole world?
Yeah, I guess I don't know if I'm the guy, but I'm one of the guys. I mean, I've been at it for several years now. I really stand on the shoulder of giants, scientists, researchers, doctors that have been talking about it for decades, engineers. But it's not the most popular topic. A lot of these people are being ignored. And this is really what got me into the topic, is realizing, wait a minute, we have very credible scientists, biophysicists, the late Martin Blank from Columbia. We have one guy, Hugh Taylor from Yale, who has been pretty much screaming about it for years, saying, EMFs is not safe in children. We should do something. You have Dr. Deborah Davis, who won a Co-Nobel Prize for her work around environmental toxins. And she switched to EMF, saying, look, the limits we have on these EMF exposures are anything but safe. And why would she, and all these scientists that are credible and have entire careers, why would they risk their career for a topic that is pseudoscientific? That was my question. And the answer is, well, they're not. They're not risking their career. They're really trying to tell the truth. And the truth is that the safety limits that we have at the moment are not safe. We don't know what the safe levels of EMFs are, but we know that there are effects from everyday gadgets. And why do we know that? Well, because there's a tremendous amount of science that has been published in the last decades. And we know that it impairs healing in different ways. And this is really when I realized that. And I said, wait a minute, you're telling me that my phone in my pocket, the computer in front of me, the Wi-Fi router in the corner of my garage, or even worse, in my living room right next to my kids, you're telling me that all of these things are what are they doing? They're toxic? Yeah, well, they're a stressor. We have to think about it in that way. If you have bad air quality in your home, it's a stressor. You're breathing it in. You're not dying right away, right? I mean, obviously, if you're dying right away, well, there's going to be some action taken in today's society. If the air is unbreathable right away, there will be something that people do. Remove the chemical. If there's asbestos, right? There are certain situations. If there's a chemical spillover, if there is a fire and there's smoke, obviously we do something. But it is more difficult for people to grasp and for health authorities also to grasp, like, what are the long-term effects? And for most people, EMFs, it's a matter of long-term exposure over time. For the most sensitive people over there, the effects can be quite dramatic and quick, though. And this is really, when it comes to Lyme, I was talking with Dr. Neil Nathan, who's one of the top authority in environmental medicine, and he said there are two main factors that will cause EMF sensitivity to develop. The first one is Lyme disease, he told me, and that was from a few months ago. The second one is mold exposure. A lot of people with Lyme have had mold exposure or other toxic exposures that made their condition become chronic. They cannot recover from it. So right there, it tells you that now you don't only have Lyme that you're trying to combat, but you also have EMF sensitivity where you might not realize it, but maybe you're at a coffee shop. That happened to me a few years, when I was traveling in Thailand, and I was at a coffee shop. I entered a coffee shop feeling motivated to work. And at this point in my life, I felt very weak in a sense that I don't think I had Lyme disease or anything like that, but I just had recovered from chronic fatigue and being very, very fatigued as an entrepreneur. At 26 years old, I had 2 hours of juice in me per day. I mean, at 26. So it was very, very bad, to be honest. And I barely slept for 2 years prior to that. So I really, really burned the candles at both ends, trying to make it as an entrepreneur, writing about health. Ironic, right? So now right? I try to walk the talk a little bit more. But long story short is I sit down at this Starbucks and all of a sudden I start feeling almost depressed. After about 15 minutes of productivity, I feel depressed and almost negative towards my work. Like, oh, this isn't good. Nothing is working, and very depressed, very foggy. And I look up, and right there on the ceiling is an industrial strength router. These ones that can basically accept hundreds of connections at the same time. They're very, very powerful. And I was right next to it, a few feet from my head. What I did immediately is I leave the coffee shop, I go grounding. My feet are barefoot on the earth right in front of the Starbucks, looking a little bit weird in Thailand. Not a lot of people do that, I can tell you that. And after 15 minutes, I feel fine. And my brain fog clears out. And I realize at this point, my God, I really underestimated how sensitive I am to Wi-Fi routers. And I had the same thing happen several times in coffee shops, in people's home, where I'm at the dinner table and I just feel, almost angry, irritated. And I looked right there and the Wi-Fi router was a few feet away. So for some people with Lyme or chronic disease, this is how they would figure out that they have sensitivity. Maybe it's you put the phone on your head and then all of a sudden you start getting that brain fog, or you start feeling agitated. It might be depression. It might be anxiety. It might be your heart beats bizarrely. Some people get heart arrhythmias or just an elevated heartbeat. It might be the opposite. It might be that it slows down too much. So it is very difficult to see. if you have these EMF sensitivity symptoms. But one thing is sure, if you remove the exposure or you stop using your phone next to your head, or maybe you turn off the Wi-Fi router and you go with the wired route and Ethernet cable to your computer, you will feel the difference. So it's by removal of toxic agent that you feel the difference. And this is really the key here. If you have Lyme, or even if you're super healthy, you don't have anything, you're just listening to the summit to educate yourself on such an important topic, do the experiment. Turn off the Wi-Fi at night and remove your phone from your bedstand for a few nights. And for it, I know it happened to you, Dr. Tom. It happened to several scientists, physicians, engineers, everyday people, from soccer moms to athletes. I tell them the same thing. And a lot of them come back to me in disbelief. They say, oh my God, they're not in, well, they were in disbelief. Now they're in shock. And they say, oh my God, I sleep way better. And that one time I forgot to turn off the Wi-Fi router before bed, I was sleepless. Your body, I think, gets acclimated to these toxic exposures. When you remove them, your body is a little bit disturbed for a few nights, and then you have better sleep. I think it is equivalent to when you have a sudden change of diet, or even the removal of mold, or getting in a cleaner environment might trigger a strong healing response in certain people. So this is all of it. I don't even know it was an answer to what question, but this is really why I got into the topic, is the confirmation that this can help people very quickly. This is really what made it for me. That made me say, oh my God, there's such a marvelous potential for healing if we only teach people a few key action steps to reduce exposure. And this is really what made it for me, what made it so important.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because, as you mentioned, I mean, for me, I felt I was over Lyme, Babesia, heavy metals. I went to this time where I learned about EMFs. So I turned off the Wi-Fi router at night, and out of the blue, I have insomnia for a couple of weeks, right? Like, I know I've told you this, right? And so it's like, it is. And this is one thing I think is really important, like where you're bringing in what you talk with Dr. Nathan and stuff, is a lot of it's just like, I always use the cup, right? And I just say, look, you have this much toxicity you can handle. And it's like, okay, I've got Lyme, I've got mold. Oop, now I've got the EMF thing, and your cup kind of overflows. So the thing I also love what you pointed out, some people are right near the top, and if they get an exposure, they're very sensitive. But as you mentioned, a lot of people, it's kind of more like the insidious EMF over time. And I think that that's really important for our audience to know, is that it's not always just cut and dry. And for me, it was that removal that was almost like a detoxification reaction. And I don't know if I told you this. I talked about this one year after an iLads conference on a virtual event, and then I got this like nice hate website created about me, and they put a little like somebody who sort of looked crazy like me with a tinfoil hat on, which I thought was hilarious because you have the non-tinfoil hat book. And they were literally like, I was talking about how when you make a shift that moves in the positive direction for your health, sometimes you'll go through that healing response. I've heard it, a Herxheimer, a die-off, or whatever.
Yeah.
A lot of my friends, though, in osteopathy call it a vital response. Your body's coming back online. So I think what you're pointing out, Nick, is not only that we might not be able to figure it out so easily, but the removal allows us to go through a process of like resetting the whole body. And then what I learned, and then, talking with you and stuff, is that like, eventually I was the person that if the Wi-Fi is left on at night, I know it. So, I think that's really interesting. So, but we keep saying this EMF thing. We're talking about the Wi-Fi. I think a lot of people know about Wi-Fi and phone, but what are EMFs technically? And so like we can get defined for people what we're actually kind of riffing on.
Yeah, there's different types of electromagnetic fields. We're talking about EMF, electromagnetic fields, or electromagnetic radiation, that can be classified in different types of fields that we are exposed to on a common basis. We're talking really about the artificial fields that are brand new and foreign to our biology. The reality is we didn't have wireless exposures even 20 to 30 years ago. The first Wi-Fi router was used in Silicon Valley I think at the end of the 90s. But the consumers didn't start to have them before maybe I don't know if 2003, 2005, and then you get into the launch of the iPhone. I remember it was a practical joke among my friends. In 2010, when we heard about the iPhone, we're like, who pays that much for a phone? I was laughing about it. I was ridiculing Apple. I'm like, okay, the iPhone, what kind of joke is this? Uh-oh, now Nick owns his seventh iPhone. So I guess they got me. In reality, everything, say, why am I talking about the iPhone? Well, the advent of the smartphones is so new, and yet in our minds, it's so old, right? Oh, it's like ages ago. We've always had a smartphone. No, it's very recent technology. And what the smartphone emits is a type of radiation at a frequency that it's not seen in nature. We are getting a little bit of these exposure in the radio frequency range of frequencies in nature, but it's a minute fraction of the intensity of your phone. So it cannot be compared. It's like apple to oranges. So what happens when you introduce something completely artificial to the body? Well, it's the same idea as introducing food that your body does not recognize. If you have extra or ultra processed pasteurized milk and you mix it with ultra processed sugar and ultra processed flour, and you have an ultra processed cake, what do you think is doing to your body? Well, the body is kind of, okay, well, let's eliminate that as quickly as possible. It's not nutrition. You cannot thrive on this kind of ultra processed foods. And most people have realized that. And even I don't think it's such a controversial idea in even mainstream nutrition now that, well, maybe just eating cake all day, every day doesn't work, right? So it's nothing new. So artificial is not necessarily bad, because you can have artificial frequencies that are healing. And that's the thing that confuses some people, I think. If you have a red light therapy panel or a pulse electromagnetic field therapy device, PEMF, that you might hear about in the summit or others, these are machines that have been engineered to induce a healing response. You use them for a certain duration of time. They use specific frequencies, specific signal characteristics. And then we know with scientific papers to prove it that they will speed up the healing response. We also know, though, that even in very sensitive patients, some of them cannot tolerate even the red light panel because it's a stressor, and then you recover from it and you get the benefits. If you just stress the body and cannot recover from it because your body is already, you don't have any energy. You don't have any, your bucket is overflowing. Limit, right?
Yeah, toxin level is too high.
Your toxic level is too high. Even the red light therapy might be too much for you. So in reality, these EMFs that we are exposed to from everyday gadgets, including the Wi-Fi routers, it might be the cell phone towers, right? But your cell phone, the Bluetooth earpiece or earbuds, the wearables, smartwatches, and there's so many different sources that emit wireless, that when you're exposed to those, you don't necessarily recover from it. And you don't have a period where you're not exposed. And that's really the key here, is that our bodies are trying to adapt to these signals. And it is likely that they could adapt if you have 5 minutes of exposure per day total, and then you go back to nature and there's zero exposure, you're probably okay. But it's really 24/7 continuous unabated exposure. Chronic exposure, just like chronic exposure to toxins, becomes highly problematic. If you're very healthy, you go in a moldy environment for a few hours, and then you don't go to a moldy environment, you come back to a normal place, and you have a healthy home without massive amount of mold, you're probably okay because your system can adapt. The problem is that unabated exposure. So this is really, I think that the main issues that we're seeing is really with the wireless increasing so fast. It's one type of EMFs. There are other types of EMFs we can talk about. Even artificial light could be said to be one type of EMF. So how much we look at screens before bed, and this is why I have these Bono from YouTube looking glasses when I do interviews, is I try to mitigate the screen. I just feel that it's calming down my eyes, and for a lot of other reasons. But there are ways to mitigate all of these EMFs and to try to minimize our exposure to these different types of EMFs. But I think wireless is the worst because it's the fastest increasing one. While we're talking, people are getting contacted by telecom companies who say, well, this one router with 2 antennas on it that you have in the corner of your garage, it's not strong enough. You got to have the version with 8 antennas. And now you got to have a booster on the second floor because your daughter wants better Wi-Fi for her use of TikTok. I don't know, but the reality is households are becoming more and more and more polluted as we speak. And this is true inside the home. This is also true outside the home with the installation of more and more and more cell phone towers, for example. So this is why usually I focus on wireless. This is one where you have a lot of control over, and this is one where unfortunately a lot of people are moving in the wrong direction with it.
Yeah, it's interesting because as you were starting to kind of talk about all that, about Silicon Valley, I was like, oh my God, Steve Jobs. Like, right? I mean, like, why did he die of pancreatic cancer? And it makes you wonder, because these guys were the first people to be exposed, like probably at a level, I mean, probably not the level that we're all exposed to today, but it kind of dawned on me. And I think that the analogy with mycotoxin illness is really important, that there are people who get Lyme disease and never get sick, or they get sick a little and their body takes care of it all because they had a low toxin load, their immune system was working well. And then also with mold exposure, it's like a lot of people can't get away from mold, but it's the amount of mold that you have in your environment and your ability to handle it. And like you said, Nick, it's like constant exposure is potentially worse than just a higher level here and there. But it's really that recovery time that we give our body. And I'm just thinking a lot about like your story, like, hey, I was an entrepreneur. I got started. I wasn't sleeping a lot. I was working really hard. I was going for it. Well, you're never giving yourself the time to recover. And then we get people with chronic Lyme and chronic mold exposure. And then but they have to have the latest and greatest Wi-Fi in their house. So now, they're just getting overwhelmed and hyper bombarded by this. So when we look at, I think these points are so critical to understand that none of these things, in my opinion, at least, are evil. It's just it's a dose and a frequency of duration of exposure that's an issue. And everybody's unique too. You pointed out, and I always like to kind of summarize some of these things for our listeners, because you summarize that some people can get exposed to Wi-Fi and not have an apparent problem right away, and others are very sensitive. Same with the red light therapy. I've had people with PEMF. I put it on like, the frequency of the planet. It should be like being in the womb, and we put and it's like, but it's like it starts at 50% of the max intensity, and I have to go down to 1%, and it's still bugging them because I pushed them too hard. So I just think that the points that you're bringing out are just amazing knowledge bombs for people to remember how to put this in perspective. So I would love to talk a little bit about like how the EMFs really work on the immune system and what some of the science might be. But firstly, you keep kind of hinting about focusing on routers and stuff. What are some of the things that I can actually do in my house now that, like, is there like a tip that would that I can, because we're kind of bashing on Wi-Fi routers, and I know we usually talk about this at the end, but like this to me is one of the most important changes I ever made in my life. So I kind of want to let you share this with people.
Yeah, the Wi-Fi router, it's the Wi-Fi router. If you get good connectivity from your own Wi-Fi in every room in your house, what is connectivity? That's another word for electropollution. So the reality is, coverage, if it's good in your home is electropolluted. And that's just how it is. You can decide to have Wi-Fi, but if you decide to have Wi-Fi at home, you're introducing a stressor for your biology. And that's fine, but at least turn it off at night, because you certainly don't need it in the middle of the night. So if you reduce exposure by 7 or 8 hours during the night, you're doing something very good for your biology. And also, more so, I would say, we know, or it's hypothesized, and I think it's extremely likely that this is the case, that our wireless exposures or exposure to any EMFs is much more damaging to our biology when it's during the evening and at night, because there seem to be a strong effect, a negative effect on sleep when you are exposed to these wireless frequencies. So therefore, eliminating them at night might prove way more beneficial than eliminating them during the day, just like it's the case with artificial light, for example. So there's something to be said with just turning off the Wi-Fi at night. And of course, if you turn off the Wi-Fi, but you have 2 phones and 2 laptops and how many different wireless devices in your bedroom, maybe not the best idea. So I would say try to get these devices out of the room if you can. And if you can't, have them as far away from your pillow area as possible, because creating distance will make a massive difference in how much intensity you're getting and how much your body is absorbing.
Yeah, because I think that like when I know that on your website you have like timers and stuff, because I'm a big fan of get a timer, plug your Wi-Fi router in it, set it and forget it, so that you don't even have to think about it. And it also reminds you when you're supposed to go to sleep, so that you're not just screwing around on your phone all night. But one of the things a lot of people tell me is like, hey, what my neighbors, I live in a townhouse or an apartment, but my neighbors have Wi-Fi. So really the key is there is a benefit of distance. And so the closer it is to you, the worse it is.
Yes, exactly. And your neighbor's Wi-Fi, sometimes it can be problematic if it's right on the other side of the wall, for example. Yes, in rare occasions, it can be problematic. I'd say send this interview to your neighbor if possible. If you have such a good relationship with your neighbor, if you know his name, a lot of people don't. And that's just the world we live in. It's a little bit more difficult to keep good relationships. And don't try to impose on your neighbor to turn off Wi-Fi, though, because it might be perceived as a personal attack. You know, a lot of people are very, very concerned. No, my Wi-Fi, are you kidding me? It's almost an offense, you know. But people need to be educated first to be able to understand why is it justified to turn it off at night. And in the end, there's benefits for everyone in the building. That being said, focus on your own stuff first, on your machines, on your things that you can turn off at night. And if you start with your Wi-Fi router, you're already doing good. You know, for some people who live in a city, they have 120 different Wi-Fi lists. If they look on their Wi-Fi list, it doesn't end. There's like, you could detect more than that. I think it just shows the ones that are more detectable, but it can be, your computer can detect Wi-Fis that are hundreds of feet away. It does not mean you can necessarily connect to them with good connectivity, but you can find it. So the signal is there somewhere. So there's a lot of electropollution in those cities. And the reality is you will be exposed to large amounts of EMFs from these neighbors and these cell phone towers. That being said, even for these people, when I tell them to turn off their own Wi-Fi router, sometimes they see benefits. So there's something to be said to just focus on what you can control. In rare occasions, if people feel extremely EMF sensitive, they haven't had a good night of sleep in years, and they live in downtown New York City, they look outside the window, they can almost touch a cell phone tower. Well, it's like living in a moldy home while trying to recover from mold toxicity. So at one point, maybe your home is not placed in the right place for you to support healing. So there's rare occasions where people have to literally move away, or even temporarily so, move in nature for a few months to recover from these EMF sensitivities. But that being said, for a lot of people, they do see the benefits even when they're exposed to these outside exposures. So yes, you cannot cop out on this and say, oh, well, the neighbors are exposing me anyway, so I will not turn off my own Wi-Fi. No, in reality, it will make a difference regardless of outside exposures.
Yeah. And so one of the other, I have found it to be one of the most beneficial things ever, because some of the places I've lived, hardwiring was challenging. And, you know, and a lot of my living environments, I have these very long cords that wrap around the whole house, so I don't have to have the Wi-Fi, but you can't always do that. So if I'm turning it off at night, the other thing that you mentioned that I know a lot of people will have in their bedroom, even, you know, even if we tell them not to have it in their bedroom, maybe you're using your phone as, you know, whatever, what's it called? An alarm clock or whatever.
Yeah.
are there other things that I need to do at night with my phone or with the other gadgets I have to minimize, if like I turned off the Wi-Fi, is that all I need to do? Or are there other things that I can do in that area?
Yeah, well, if you turn off your phone completely, it can help. I know that a lot of people, though, they don't want to do this. They expect calls, for example, so they cannot even put it on the airplane mode necessarily. If you cannot put it on airplane mode, put the ringer at the maximum loudness possible and put it in the next room or in the corridor charging, or just as far as possible from your pillow. So maybe it's a drawer, or the opposite side of the room is good. It's going to make a big difference. But again, some people fall asleep with their phones, or they listen to a meditation app and then fall asleep, but they don't realize that it's emitting 4G, LTE, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth all night, right? So that's not good.
Right. And yeah. What about like like, let's say I do have a kiddo and I have the phone, like, on, it's not on airplane mode, but what's up? I mean, if I've turned off the Wi-Fi and I don't have a Bluetooth device next to me, is it okay to leave those on the phone, or is there a problem with that?
There's still a problem. In fact, if you have the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth icons activated on your phone, even if there's no Bluetooth around or no Wi-Fi around, it's still looking for a network. So it's emitting a pulse of, I'm looking for something. And you would be surprised, because even how it shows you how poorly our technology is built. There's, for example, alarm clocks in the average hotel room that I go to when I do business travels and in keynotes. The average alarm clock in your average hotel now is emitting Bluetooth 24/7. Even if you don't, I don't plan to use the alarm clock because I use my phone on airplane mode. I don't think twice about the thing, but when I have my detector and I go towards it, it's always emitting, sometimes multiple times per second, or it might be every few seconds. So it is a hidden source, a completely useless source of wireless that is emitting all the time. And the way the technology is built is that engineers are being lazy about it. It's maximum exposure all the time, because that way it connects faster to your phone whenever you decide that you want to connect your phone to the alarm clock to play, because the alarm clock happens to have a Bluetooth speaker, and now you can play your favorite songs on Spotify. Yeah. Cool. But the reality is, if you don't use the thing, it's still emitting and still impacting you. So of course you got to unplug it. And sometimes, you just have these different machines that have a Bluetooth capability, and unfortunately, it rhymes with Bluetooth always emitting, like the alarm clock will be saying, I'm here, sending signals to, hoping that there's someone who cares, right? And then your phone, if you have the Bluetooth on, it always says, I'm here in case I need to connect to some Bluetooth thing. So make sure that these icons are completely crossed off, which says that the Bluetooth is off, the Wi-Fi is off. And then if you need to stay connected to the cellular network at night, I just put the phone as far away as possible from where you sleep.
I love it. Yeah, I think it's so important, because it's like one of the things that I've seen with sleep is like it's that constant pulsing that's irritating to the parasympathetic nervous system, which is supposed to allow you to rest and rejuvenate. And so many people that I just have them turn off the Wi-Fi, do those couple of tips you said, for the phone, their insomnia gets dramatically better. And as a reminder to everyone, the primary time our brain detoxifies is at night, when we're sleeping, and deep sleep is the critical piece of this. So what's really important to me is, like, if you want to know, like, the greatest thing for detoxification of your brain and fixing your brain fog, it's not a supplement, it's not an IV, it's not a medical treatment, it's sleep. And so if you want to get really good sleep, the first thing that you can do, that's probably a lot of people haven't come across, is turn off your Wi-Fi and zoot up your phone, so that you're at least minimizing what you're exposed to. And definitely, like, that 12-foot rule, incredible. It's just, I love keeping it as far as possible away. And And it's interesting when you live this lower EMF lifestyle, when you're traveling, you're like, oh my God, like my sleep, and it's like somebody had a war in the hotel room after I go there, because I'm like unplugging like literally every single day. And it's
Same
like crazy.
thing.
Come in, like the TV, you can feel the television. It's like, it's on every time I walk in the room, and I'm like, oh my God. So
100%. Yeah. And this is something, that shows you when you travel, you can also apply these steps as best as you can. Sometimes the Wi-Fi router is right there. You can turn it off. Sometimes I bring my cables. The reality is I bring my cables. I'm in Osaka, Japan, as we're recording this, and I have a long cable. I think might be 50 feet, and the Wi-Fi router is a long way in the room, and I have about 35 feet of going around the kitchen and electrical tape, and then I'm plugged in. So here I have zero exposure, and this is my office environment. This is a room where I'll be spending the next 3 months. So there's something to be said with how much exposure you're getting from your computer. And I want everyone to consider this, regardless of the Wi-Fi use. If you can not use Wi-Fi on your computer, if you're someone who works at a computer, then you're getting tremendous benefits, because I don't know how many hours I spend in front of the computer. I don't want to see the real figure per year, but it's in the thousands of hours that I'll be spending right here. So the exposure is about 18 inches, or maybe closer to my entire body, is where the Wi-Fi chip is. So sometimes your computer is even worse than the Wi-Fi router itself, because maybe you're not close to the Wi-Fi router. Maybe it's 20 feet from you, or 30 feet, or 50, but your computer is right in front of you. So the number of hours you might be spending in front of this machine might be tremendous. So if you can invest in having cables, Ethernet cables, go from your router, regardless of whether it's Wi-Fi or not, and go to your computer, and then on your computer, you turn off the Wi-Fi. There's also massive benefits right there. Because for me, to be quite honest, I told about my Starbucks story at the beginning of this conversation. I don't get brain fog anymore. Maybe if I push it and I work on Wi-Fi right next to my face all day, maybe I'll get something, or I'll feel fatigued, but I don't get that instantaneous effect. So it could be tempting for me to be, if I wasn't the EMF guy, I wasn't doing all this, maybe I would have forgotten about the topic, and just, okay, I don't feel it now, so it's probably fine. It's not. If you're not symptomatic from an exposure, it does not mean that it's not hacking away at your reserves, at your antioxidants, at your energy levels. So it is still doing something. So if you can eliminate that exposure at the computer, there's massive benefits that are right there. It's a low-hanging fruit, really.
Well, and I think it's so critical because, like my goal is for everyone listening, if you have Lyme, mold toxicity, even other, tick-borne co-infections or heavy metal, whatever your environmental exposure is, that you heal. And I'm planning right now, when we work with our patients, for when someone's better. And because when I'm planning teaching them the lifestyle of, things that they should follow when they're healthy, that means, one, we're getting in the mindset of being healthy. And so then we're more likely to achieve it. But two, living a healthy lifestyle is what allows your body to heal. It's not like I will heal and then live a healthy lifestyle. It's the healthy lifestyle. So I love it. And you get into the habit of it when you don't have as much resilience, or like you said, some people are listening to us who have just learning and educating. Do this stuff. It's so important. We want to prevent things like cancer and immune suppression. We know that all these things that these EMFs will do to our bodies. So I just think it's so important to be armed with this knowledge. Now, one thing I do want to ask you is, there's a whole bunch of gadgets out there, right? I can wear things. I can, I can draw things. I can cover my bed with things. Is there anything that's really known to work to minimize your EMF exposure other than actually not being exposed to EMFs?
Yeah, well, elimination or reduction is really the first step, because if you're just relying on gadgets, I think you're just doing it wrong. It's the equivalent of saying, well, okay, I'm gonna eliminate toxins from my diet, so I'm gonna take glutathione. I'm gonna take an antioxidant and call it a day. Oh, now I'm detoxing. Like, it doesn't matter how much mercury is in my tuna, how much arsenic is in my chicken because I'm taking these supplements. Yeah, well, you're better doing both probably because you're getting exposed to a lot of toxins anyway. So it's really, we have to be smart about it and try to do the habits that are honestly more difficult than popping a pill. It's a little bit more complicated. Having your family agree with turning off Wi-Fi entirely might be a big battle. For some families, I know some people have been following me for years, or on my Facebook group with our course Electropollution Fix, and some people have not achieved that yet, but they achieved turning it off at night. So it might be complicated, but anyhow, you gotta focus your time on these practices first, and then if there are certain tools that can help you minimize exposure, well, that's good news. And there are certain things you can use on your person. For example, certain cases that are legit in my view. The company Shield Your Body is pretty good and created by an engineer, and he's the son of the late Martin Blank that I talked about, R. Blank. And R. Blank is himself a software engineer, someone from the tech space who learned about these dangers through his father, who was this EMF scientist at the highest level, and now he's developing these solutions. So there are a few cases you can use. So if you have to go around your day and you have a phone, you don't want to put it in your pocket, don't want to expose your private areas to it, or you don't want to put it in front of your heart or in your bra. So where do you put it? Well, there are certain belt hoisters or other accessories that can help you minimize exposure while you're carrying a phone, for example. These are valid. There are other solutions like laptop tablets where you can put your laptop on it. But I think these are half solutions, and I had good conversations with R, and he's very realistic about it. He has a company of EMF protective devices, but he also educates on, well, you should not use Wi-Fi, but if you do, use a platform to protect, your fertility. So there are solutions in there that are well engineered, but usually they are, the lesser of two evils kind of things. But they can help, and they can help also if you have family members that don't want to follow any of this advice. Right. Maybe you can say, okay, yeah, look, I know, I understand that you don't agree with it or understand it, but can you use this with your laptop, for example? And they will get benefits from it. It will reduce some of their exposure. So there are a few tools like this that are legit. And I think we should really go with this route of products that have a measurable reduction in these EMFs. There are an entire category of products that claim to harmonize EMF signals. And that's a whole another story, almost an entire dedicated conversation to be had. But the long story short is, some of these gizmos that you can wear, including stickers you put on your phone, there are some pendants that are being sold. Some people seem to have good success in the sense that it minimizes their symptoms, their immediate symptoms. I think that what might be happening, and that's just a theory, but also has been, let's say, semi-confirmed by some scientists, is maybe they are strengthening the human biofield. So certain natural EMFs that are produced by your body, your brain is emitting EMFs, your heart is emitting EMFs, every cell, every mitochondria, everything is EMF in your body. You're a bioelectrical being. If there are certain things you can put on your body where your natural EMFs will resonate with certain materials, it might help you, let's say, strengthen your body. So maybe you'll wear something on your person and now you're exposed to these EMFs and you don't get that brain fog immediately. Now maybe you have a little bit more resilience. Well, that's good. It's hard to judge which thing works or not. So it's really an experiment you'll have to do by yourself. But again, the problem here is some people wear these things, feel better, and start exposing themselves more. That's the wrong approach. These days, I'm not exposing myself more, even though I don't get that immediate brain fog from these exposures. So just, I guess, if you use it in with an understanding that regardless of your symptoms, you should minimize exposure, then by all means, there are several things on the market. Some of them are approved by doctors I've seen. So that's good. I would, if I had to purchase such a device, I would go with a recommendation from a doctor who's had good experiences in a clinical view. Like, my patients are using this pendant, they feel better. Okay, well, that's something, because I think that these people can figure out the truth very quickly with the clinical reality and not necessarily the studies. So I think that when the results are rooted in the real world result, there's something to be said about those. But why I don't like this entire category of product is that sometimes how they're marketed is kind of, oh, well, you wear them and now you can expose yourself as much as you want. So that part I don't like. It should be you wear them and you also do the EMF mitigation, because I don't think, I'm not personally completely convinced, and I talked with several scientists who follow the same line of thinking. I'm not convinced that they make you invincible to EMFs, and this is something kind of claimed or presupposed in their marketing. So just be aware of that, and if you use them with all of this in that big caveat in mind, well, by all means, they can help you maybe be more resilient in environments where you can hardly turn off the cell phone towers, right? So if you go in a city and you feel bad, it can help you feel stronger. By all means, it can be a great tool.
Yeah, I think it's just such a great synopsis. And I've seen so many people have an individual response to a lot of the gadgets and stuff. And, and I think a lot of it is your own unique bioresonance. But I would 100% agree. These are almost like additional layers of optimizing your health, not giving you the opportunity to just live a shitty lifestyle and be exposed to EMF all day. And again, like you're saying, like if you're traveling or you're going somewhere where you can't follow your typical routine, they may help you with that.
Correct.
And I certainly, I was just, before we were talking, my wife's back was bothering a little. I gave her an osteopathic treatment. And one of the things that one of our mentors did is teach us how to sort of clear the body of sort of the electromagnetic fog, like that comes over the nervous system, where the nervous system gets all wound up. And we have clearing plates and they have little drawings on them, but it's mostly my intention and attention to release that on her body. But it's also a person that I've lived with for over 22 years, and we're very highly trained in energy medicine. But we only use it, we use it as an added on, right? And so our lifestyle is exactly the way you've explained it. And I'm so honored, and I love your message, because like I said in the beginning, there are people doing a lot of the science, and there's a lot of people talking about EMF, but I really appreciate the fact that you're here to tell us about the science and then what everybody else is talking about, and not afraid to call bullshit, because the most important thing to me is that we get the right information in the hands of people. And I think the way you just summarized, because I know that little piece of those gadgets is a hot topic, because everybody wants to buy the silver bullet or the medallion that's going to save them.
Yes. Yeah, so it is tempting. I'm not blaming anyone. It is tempting to find a device on the internet that tells you wear this, now you can forget about it. I'm tempted personally. I'm like, oh yeah, what if I come across one device that works? I can tell you though, from my own research a few months ago, I interviewed Dr. Gaetan Chevalier, who's an expert in earthing, but also is the head of the SciTech labs in California. SciTech does basically they are trying to demonstrate scientifically with different instruments the benefits of energy healing, of products that augment the biofield and other frontier sciences phenomenon, including meditation, for example. So it is a scientific endeavor that is quite cutting edge. And they have confirmed with me that some of these devices that are in that category of EMF harmonization show great benefits for the user, in the sense that they can they will talk on the phone without the, let's say, the pendant or the chip on their phone, and they will see a reduction in biofield that can last for hours, showing immense stress to the biofield. So basically, your energy reserves go way down after a few minutes on the phone, and then it takes a few hours to recover, and it goes back to baseline. With these modalities, it does not do that, or sometimes they go above baseline after a call. So it seems to have, let's say, a protective effect in that sense on your biofield and on your energy levels. And some people can feel it, so they don't need that experiment. They say, well, I tested it and it works and I feel great. So that's good. So I cannot discount this entire category of product for that reason. And my hope, and I know that this is coming, is that we're going to have better testing for these devices in the next few years. And there are some scientists working on it. They lack funding, I think, and it's quite an endeavor. But if we at least have a few trusted brands, and we know exactly they've been tested independently by this lab or by others, then I think consumers will be in a much better position, where they will be that much less likely to get scammed and buy something that is just a plastic toy, because there are some of those on Amazon that are completely not legit and a straight up scam. And on the other hand, you have credible work that deserves to be known. So it's an emerging field, unregulated, so it's quite difficult to navigate. But again, trust your physician on this. If you find a doctor that has endorsed something that can strengthen your biofield and make you feel better, by all means, I think it's you don't have anything to lose, really, if you understand that EMF mitigation is still important.
Right. I think so well said, Nick. And I think, for me, the number one thing is those gadgets can help. I agree. It's science. Let's get the research and find out what are the ones that we can measure. But that, like you said, the human biofield, the number one thing you guys can do to really start to understand that is to actually start to feel your own energy field. And we'll be diving into that in the summit. Breath work, meditation, prayer, whatever it is for you that gets you to calm down in your body and actually have an experience of being within your body, feeling that energy, you can rejuvenate it. Because then when you start to talk with your physician, you start to work with your, maybe you try a device to give you the added boost, you'll actually be able to feel it yourself. So Nick, this conversation could, like you said, when you started talking about the bioenergetics, you're like, oh, we could talk about this for a whole nother thing. But I just want to honor your time and say thank you so much for being here and sharing this wisdom. I'm sure like everyone's going to want to run over and learn more about the work you're doing and have a really great resource that they can count on as trusted and vetted by us to, tell them about EMFs as things continue to develop over time. So where can people find out about you?
It's at theemfguy.com. There's my book there. I have also a course to learn how to minimize EMFs at home. And there's always new things coming up. I have a podcast also on safer technology. So if people are interested to learn more about me, theemfguy.com, this is where they're going to find all about it.
Sounds wonderful. Again, Nick, the EMF guy, Pino. And again, deep gratitude. So many thanks for being a part of this summit. And everyone, I'd like to thank you for joining myself and Nick for this awesome EMF conversation as part of the Healing from Lyme Disease Summit. And I'm really looking forward to see you in our next episode. Thanks so much for joining us.